you need to be one of two things. You need to be a salesperson, or you need to be a very technical person who can build something. The salesperson will do better than the technical person because technical people will always struggle to sell. They'll always struggle. And you're not just selling to the customer, you're selling to the banker, you're selling to the VC, you're always selling. That's your job as an entrepreneur because you want to make money. Somebody has to buy your product or your service at the end of the day, or your mentorship, whatever it is that you're pushing, right? So sales is the biggest and the most important trait that people need to learn. What do you want out of life? Do you just want to keep doing this? What does success look like to you? And what does your happiness look like? Do what you need to do to take a break. Your success is not determined by your productivity level. Recognize that those skills that got you those achievements will get you that after the fact. But take a minute to pause because life is really short. Like if you didn't learn that in the pandemic, there will be something else will push in front of you to say, relax, take a time out and breathe. It's okay to breathe sometimes.
Welcome to Visionary Voices, a podcast where we get to speak to inspiring entrepreneurs and leaders in the Canadian business space. Today, we are honored to have Meryl Afrika, a seasoned financial services professional with a decade of expertise in transformative payment solutions. Meryl is not just an industry expert, but also a social impact champion, and she's led a lot of initiatives connecting Black professionals globally. Meryl used to be the president of CAUFP, and you were the founder of BlackTies, the co-founder of BlackTies. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We're honored to have you, Meryl.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be part of the podcast and part of a lineup of amazing guests that you've had. So thanks for having me.
I did a lot of research about you. I listened to a lot of the interviews you have done, and I am super inspired by your own personal journey. A lot of your background is like me, but it's very different in a lot of ways. You're originally from South Africa. I'm originally from Cameroon. I've been here 13 years. You've been here about that, a little bit over. But
Yes.
you're such an inspiration. You're such a visionary. So many things. I just want to get to know a little bit more about your personal story. So just tell us a little bit about Meryl. Who's Meryl?
Thank you. That was a really beautiful intro. So as mentioned, I'm originally from South Africa. I was born there, grew up there. I grew up in a township called Ennerdale. So, for those who know a little bit about South Africa's history, we had apartheid, and so with apartheid, there was segregation of where Black people and colored people and Indian people could live, and so I grew up in one of those townships. So I was part of the first generation of people of color that went from segregated schools up until the fourth grade into non-segregated schools. So you can just imagine sort of that eye-opening sort of experience, and then having a sister who was um, 13 years older than me, and having her sort of lived experience versus my mother's lived experience throughout the apartheid regime. So part of the first generation to go to non-segregated schools, first generation to go to university. When I graduated, I moved to Canada, and since then I've lived across various provinces. So lived in Manitoba, in Alberta. um, I'm now in Toronto. Was spent a little stint in Montreal as well. So I've had varied Canadian experiences as an immigrant, but most of my career has been in the financial services space, where I've worked predominantly in the payment space. So I've done sales, I've done product, I've done regulatory work, all on how you as a consumer, as a business, the products that you're using to move your money, save your money, the regulation that goes into that, the policies around that. And then I've also sold you guys who are probably watching some products if you were out in Alberta or in Toronto. And so I did that while simultaneously thinking about how I could grow my professional brand. And that's when I actually stepped into CAUFP as part of the leadership and led the organization throughout the pandemic. And that led to the creation of BlackTies, the mobile app to connect Black professionals across the globe. And I was doing that up until a couple of months ago, from which I stepped back, and I've been sort of dealing more with the other side of being a professional of color that we don't talk about a lot, which is the burnout and the self-imposed sort of goals that you set for yourself that are insane goals, and you never stop to rest and to just sort of live and enjoy life. And so that's kind of the phase that I'm in right now.
I'm taking a note here and I'm going to come back to it. You talked about burnout, and I do, looking at your achievements, identify you as a high achiever. So we're going to come back to that part. Put my notes so I can remember to get to it. So I'm looking at your upbringing, and how did your upbringing in South Africa and going through apartheid and all of that segregation, how did it shape your vision for the things that you do right now and the impact that you're creating in business?
Yeah, I think it's why I'm extremely passionate when it comes to racial issues. Um, in South Africa, we grew up you grew up in apartheid and that was just your norm. You knew that if you were black, this is sort of the level of success you would having. If you were colored, so mixed people of mixed race lineage, even though I identify myself as black, you had a certain level of almost like a mix of racism and caste system, of expectation. And so when I came to Canada, I was really expecting that it's this country that it's a melting pot and everybody's living kumbaya and it's perfect. And you get here, and like I said, you have varied experiences depending on the province that you're in, right?
Hmm.
And it was very shocking to me because I know it sounds weird to say this, but I was never cognizant of the color of my skin until I came here,
Yeah.
because I was really reminded that you are not white. And I
Yeah.
felt that every day in the workplace and every day in my interactions in making space, even in my dating life with certain individuals, I was constantly reminded of that. And I think that just sort of empowered me to think about, we are such a liberal country as Canadians. This
Mhm.
is we welcome so many immigrants. How can we still have this type of mindset? And so when I joined CAUFP and I found out about the organization, it really just helped me sort of to have a platform or a channel through which I could say, okay, I don't fundamentally and like what's happening and what I'm seeing in society and what I'm seeing in the workplace. How do I take it upon myself to actually find a vehicle in which I can actually change all of this and make impact? And even if I'm only impacting one person and making them have a better experience, or impacting one executive to change their mind in the way that they lead or manage their team, at least I know I've done something in this life. And that's really sort of been the catalyst behind it. Is I feel like everybody has the power, no matter who you are, to at least change something in society, no matter how small. It doesn't have to be something grand. And so that's always been the thing that's motivated me.
Are you familiar with Trevor Noah?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, because I did read his book, and the book, I think it's called Born a Crime, and he makes a lot of jokes about apartheid South Africa because, of course, he's a comedian, right?
Yeah.
But that definitely also shaped his outlook on life and what he does right now in life, and also just shedding light on certain things. It gives him this unique perspective on the change that he's trying to create, and I think I hear a lot of that message in what you're saying as well.
Yeah, it's and Trevor had a very unique upbringing, because in South Africa, it's now it's more common, but back then it was very rare that somebody was, we call them, like half caste. He had a white
Yeah.
parent and a black parent. The rest of us we're mixed for centuries. And so if you look at his experience, it was predominantly he grew up in the townships with black folks. And so it's a little different to mine. But I think fundamentally, every South African that you'll ever meet, because we've all gone through apartheid and it's been impacted us so negatively, we always are the ones who will put our hands up for some form of social change or speak out against injustices, because we know what it's like to live under that type of regime. We know what the financial implications are when it comes to generational wealth, when it comes to generational trauma, when it comes through the trauma that you carry into your friendships, relationships, business, everything. And so we're always constantly thinking about how can we make the world a better place. And like I said, in any small way. Not everybody's gonna go out and be an advocate and be on BNN and yelling at like corporations like you got to
Yeah.
do better. But I think everybody tries to, at least every South African friend that I know tries to sort of fight injustice in whatever way that they can.
Yeah, awesome. So a lot of people often when they hear about the injustice side of things, they start to think that maybe government is the one that's going to change something. But one thing that I do believe is that entrepreneurs are the ones who are going to create solutions for a lot of the problems that we face. And definitely a lot of immigrants will come over here, face the barriers, certain barriers, and there are lots of them. We could talk about all of them, but there are lots of them. But a lot of people also come with this entrepreneurial spirit, entrepreneurial mindset, but they also face a barrier in trying to step into it. So, with your knowledge of the financial industry and with your experience as a banker, as all of that in that space, and also as an immigrant, what is it that immigrant entrepreneurs could do to be able to put their experiences into use and to create the change that Canada definitely needs?
Yeah, I think, don't overthink the type of business that you want to create. I think, and I see this a lot with more with younger people because they read about, there's this 20-something-year-old, they're on the Forbes 30 under 30, and they
Yeah.
raised $100 million. And I think I look at some of the best entrepreneurs that I know that are immigrants, and some of them were clients. Where, for example, there's a food chain. I can't remember the name of them because it was so many years back, but they're out in Alberta, and I think they're also in BC, and it was a Vietnamese family, and all they
Hmm.
did was supply food from back home because there wasn't really an outlet for that, and they saw that need. And then they realized, well, we're serving the Asian community, but the Black community doesn't have anyone bringing in their stuff, and the Latino community doesn't have any. And eventually, over time, more of these types of stores started popping up, but they amassed so much wealth in doing that. And I think it's, one, don't overthink what problem you need to solve. Sometimes it's a very simple problem like that, and it's not the sexiest tech whatever problem. It can literally be
Yeah.
as simple as it's a grocery store, and you can actually become wealthy off of that. Two, don't give up on your relationships back home. Those relationships back home are usually the ones that are going to help you, especially depending on the business model that you have. You come into Canada seeing opportunity because a lot of us don't have the same opportunities in our home countries. So we're
Hmm.
hungry, we're seeing those things, and I think sometimes we forget that that is an advantage. And so I think it's just making sure that you have that mindset to always be curious, to always seek opportunity. And like I said, again, it doesn't have to be the sexiest business. What is that solution or service you can provide that's eventually going to make bank for yourself?
That's great. I
Yeah.
spoke to an immigrant newcomer who was somewhere in New Brunswick, I think, and she was talking about the fact that she spoke to people about wanting to serve them with a need, and it was about providing stuff like African fabric and that. And she said a lot of her friends said, "Yeah, yeah, if you bring it in, we're gonna buy it." And then when she finally did bring it in, nobody was buying it and nobody was supporting her, quote unquote. And what I
Yes.
said to her is like, don't start a business based on the thought that your friends and family are gonna buy from you. If you want to
Yeah.
create a business, you got to create a business that solves a problem. And so I
Yeah.
think there is that difficulty in identifying, okay, I'm not trying to make this sexy or any of that, but solution, what problem is there that I could solve, and how can I be innovative in that solution that I'm trying to bring? And also getting the financial support from the bank, maybe. So is there anything you can say to that side of it, having had the experience, I guess, in all of those areas?
Yeah. No, I love that you mentioned, like, don't just rely on your circle of friends or your inner circle. I think that's the big thing, right? What can you solve for folks beyond your circle of friends is one thing. Two, people have to also remember the Canadian market is very small. So as aspirational as we are, I always advise people that when you're building, look at the black, especially if you're a black owned company, look at the US. Their market is much bigger. So that's really
Okay.
who you should be targeting. And so I've seen a lot of tech, even tech companies that have come here, and they've pulled out of Canada because the market is just, we're just not that big of a country. So those are the
Mhm.
things you kind of want to think about. In terms of like funding, I would say one mistake that I see a lot of people doing is they will only go to the bank once they've exhausted all of their personal funding, right? They'll
Mhm.
max out their credit cards, their life savings, they'll borrow from everybody, and then when they're on their last leg, they're going to the bank. That is not when you want to go to the bank because you're not going to look good on paper. You may luck out and get a financial advisor who's going to go to bat for you, but at the end of the day, he still has to make a case to an adjudicator who's a numbers person. And that person
Mhm.
is just looking at, are you is Ida the best person on paper? That's all they care about. They put you in their little model and that's it. They don't care about your story. They don't care. And you hear the story all the time. Like there's Vivian K who started Kinky Curly Yaki. And I think she was like the only black entrepreneur who started a wig and extension line with natural
Mhm.
hair. And in the US, people like businesses. Goldman Sachs is funding these businesses, but Canadian banks won't because they don't see the market for it. And so you have to remember that one, don't go to the bank when you're at your last leg. You want to look at your best when you're applying for financing. Two, um, don't just rely on the traditional, I'm going into a branch to get my financing. A
Mhm.
lot of banks now are starting incubators, they're starting VC sort of arms, like RBCX is an example. CIBC has an emerging, I think they call it the emerging tech sort of group. I forget what they're named after, but they basically bought Silicon Valley Bank's rival here in Canada, and all of those people are out there. It's essentially VC funding, but it's just
Okay.
under the guise of banking. So you want to make sure that you're reaching out on LinkedIn to alternative people that work in those lanes. Um, and I would say go and talk to people at these associations. Like there are small business associations, there are forums, like Scotia has one to help female entrepreneurs. Go and talk to those people who are working there and finding out how are they getting funding. Is it through the bank? Who's their banker? Is it through private lending? Is it through a VC that's funding them? If it is a VC, how are they pitching? How did they train for that? Who do they have to network? So you really have to start thinking outside of the box when it comes to all of the funding that you want to get. And then also, we can talk about it later, but even with those who are getting funding, there's certain mistakes that I see people doing, and
Okay.
it always surprises me because they have, fractional CFOs, for example, that are helping them out, or they have a CFO in house, but they're not utilizing their banking relationship in the best way that they could be. A big complaint I always see is the bank charges me too much on my transaction fees.
Hmm.
And so it's a common complaint. But what see a lot of entrepreneurs never doing is, so I used to work in what's called cash management sales or treasury sales. So we're
Hmm.
typically the people who will come to you. You'll have some guy who's giving you your lending, and then they usually bring somebody to the meeting, either in the beginning or down the line, who's talking to you about your online banking, right?
Hmm.
And the folks who will see this are usually the people who are at a little bit of a bigger stage. They're in the mid to large stages of their entrepreneurship journey. Um, and so they're not shopping around for pricing. They're sitting and complaining, my banker Bob at Bank A is charging me X amount of dollars, but they're not shopping around. So when Susie and John and all these people from the other banks are emailing them or coming to their store to talk to them, they're not talking to them, and they're not pricing to see what they can get. So that's one thing that I always think folks should do, because it also holds your banker accountable, right? To say,
So they
well,
should shop around for other offers in other
the other
banks. Is that what you're
banking,
saying?
yeah, the other banks, yeah, you need to go. So if somebody is soliciting you, or if you're trying to reach out, find out, when you're getting to the end of your contract, 'cause some people will have negotiated rates,
Yeah.
or even if you're paying standard rates, go and find out what the other bank's willing to pay for you. Because what happens is every bank goes through different cycles.
Yeah.
And certain banks are going to change certain industries for certain reasons because they're down on that book. They need to grow their deposits. They want to grow their small business. They are looking heavy into equipment financing. So because they want to give you that loan, they might give you free banking. You know what I mean? Like, so you shop around
So
because
how does an entrepreneur know that?
they don't know that. They won't know that unless they have a good banker or they're talking to somebody like me who's telling them. Like, I remember I was arguing. I had one of my jobs. It was a bank who was doing banking with another bank.
Yeah.
And I remember I was arguing with executives. I'm like, you guys are not getting a deal. They're lying to you and telling you that you're getting a deal. But
Uh-huh.
because I was junior, they weren't taking me serious until eventually, somebody went and shopped around. And then they realized, I was like, you could have been saving so much money because you're processing so many transactions, but because you have your relationship with your banker who might take you golfing and fancy lunches, or you're just your CFO is like so busy with doing so much accounting that they're like, that's like, I don't really care. Fine, I'll spend the 300 a month on banking. Like, I don't care. I've got bigger problems to deal with. And it's like
Yeah.
you could get better rates for your banking. You could get more lending. You don't know what you're going to get until you actually start shopping around. So whenever I'm talking to a business owner, that's the one thing I always tell them is like, yo, once a year or once every 2 years, make sure you or whoever your accountant is, this is what they're doing. They're trying to see what kind of financing they can get you. And don't just go to the big banks, go to the credit unions too, because sometimes they may not have the fanciest tech platforms, but they
Hmm.
might give you the better rates, the better deposit rates. They will have staff who will process your payroll because the system is down, and they'll manually make sure it goes into every employee's, like, you know what I mean? They'll go above
Yeah.
and
They
beyond
do
to make
better
sure that
service for you.
yeah. So that's one big thing. And then the other thing is, um, I always notice that. So I used to be in the lower end of mid market. So in the bank, the divisions are divided by the amount of lending a client requires.
Okay.
So if you're typically lending about 250 to 500,000, give or take, you'll typically be in the small business area. So that's usually the people you deal with in the branch. If you're
Okay.
lending more than that, you typically should be sitting in the commercial banking sector. Now, there's commercial banking is usually split between two, depending on the bank. That could look different ways. But I was at CIBC, so it was anybody under $5 million in lending and everybody above $5 million in lending.
Okay.
So that sweet spot of between say 500,000 to $5 million in lending, those businesses are going to generate. It depends. It differs from time to time how much revenue they're making, but usually they're the businesses that are coming out of that small business range, and they're kind of almost there at that, the big leagues.
Mm-hmm.
But usually what happens is it might be a family business, and I'm not going to fire grandma because grandma's been our accountant for the last 15 years. You We love grandma, but you need the CFO that has a CPA that worked at like Deloitte or PwC or KPMG, the person that can talk to investors and use the person who can talk to the bank and make the right argument for you. And so a lot of people don't want to fire or demote or readjust the role, the org
Mm-hmm.
structure, because it's a family business or it's their homie or it's their wife. And those are hard conversations, but it's like you gotta play in the big leagues, you gotta put on your big boy pants, right? Like you gotta make big
Yeah.
boy decisions. And that means you gotta tell grandma it's time for retirement now.
But the point is, a lot of businesses are in that space, right? I know like businesses are going to be there's the big commercial and all, but the vast
Yeah,
majority of businesses across Canada, I think,
yeah,
are in the lower section that are more
yeah,
like family oriented businesses. And so that's actually a decision that it's not an easy one to make. And a lot of people have to make it. And I guess it just becomes like, oh, what does this other person do? And then you do what they're doing.
yeah.
So where is the education? Like who needs to
If
know
you
what and where they're supposed to go to know that thing they don't know?
There isn't a lot of education on that. I actually should probably create something to help educate people on this. Usually, if you have a really good accountant, um, or a really good banker, they'll tell you these things. So I know when I was in commercial banking and into the big fives, we would tell our clients that. And sometimes they think, oh, you're just trying to get your referral to your buddy over there at the big four accounting firm. And sometimes we're like,
Yeah.
no, bro, like I'm trying to get you from a company that grosses 2 million a year to 20 million a year. And you can't get there by grandma or whomever. I keep saying grandma, but like I shouldn't
Yeah.
attack grandmas, but you can't do it with whomever it is that might be at this phase of your business. You know what I mean? Um, so I think there's a lot of skeptics because you have to be skeptical as an entrepreneur. You don't know who's trying to take advantage of you. But I think it's
Yeah.
just this is why it's important to network with other entrepreneurs, to talk to people, to talk to different bankers, because some of them they just want to hit their targets, so they don't care about your experience. But there's others who are just genuinely nice people who value relationship building, and they're gonna give it to you real, and they're gonna tell you the things you don't want to hear.
Mary, you should probably be creating that education that people don't have.
Yeah,
Because it needs somebody who's been in there. It needs somebody who's got a heart and somebody who has been on both sides of it that can actually give that advice. And I think you should definitely do it.
yeah, yeah. And I definitely will. It's good. It's like I always talk about it. I'm like, I should actually just try to create something that can help entrepreneurs with this problem. But yeah, like so those are the two big things I think entrepreneurs need to be um aware of. And then what I see with younger entrepreneurs, VC is the big hot thing right now. Everybody wants to get with the VC. Let me tell y'all, when I remember getting invited to this incubator to hear they're like, oh, we love what you guys are doing, and we want you to participate in our incubator, and we'll give you funding. And it's like you're trying to give me $100,000 and take 30% of my business. Why would I do that? Like,
Hmm.
I can go and get a loan. I can self fund. I can crowd fund. Like I can like, and so I think that's another thing. People should not get so caught up in wanting to get on those headlines of, we're pre-seed and we're around this and we're around that and we're under. You need to
Hmm.
decide, is the venture capital really for you? I think it works for some people. It doesn't work for everybody, and I think folks just need to be aware of that. You don't, like I said, you don't always need the banks, you don't always need VC. You can crowdfund, and there's crowdfunding platforms that are out there that you can use, and people will they'll pay you. They'll give you good hard earned money for a very teeny tiny percentage of stock, or sometimes not even stock, just for the product if you have a physical product you're selling, right? To be the first to get it. So I think people should just look at the different options that are there for them, and make the best financial choice given where they are in their financial journey as an entrepreneur.
Let's break that down to smaller pieces for a person who is just starting out.
Yes.
Um, okay, so not too long ago, there was this African guy, Cameroonian guy, who actually went on the Shark Tank, and he got invested in by West Hall,
Yeah.
and so a lot of people aspire to that. It's like, I think the next right thing for me to do is to get my products to a level where I can go in front of a Shark Tank or a Dragon's Den type thing
Yeah.
and get one of those people to invest in me, because that's what should happen next. Because
Yeah.
that's what we see. So, what do you say to that? What's supposed to be happening?
I think you need to have some self reflection. Why do you need to be on Shark Tank or Dragon's Den or any of these shows? Is it an ego thing? Because I want to be on TV, and I think that, and I see Wes Hall and all these great things, and I want to be in this presence so I can hope that he can help me. Can he help you? Does he have knowledge on the type of business you're trying to run? And maybe he does. He has a variety of resources, and that's also where, if you decide to go down the VC funding route, you have to choose the right firm with the right infrastructure for your business.
Hmm.
So I think people need to sit back, one, think about what funding and what growth roadmap do they have for themselves. Because let's say you go on there, you get the funding, that's great, you've now sold off your business for 20, 30, 40, whatever the percentage is, because what you see on TV isn't really what happens. There's a conversation that happens offline, and I think people
Hmm.
forget this, right? Whether it's Dragon's Den, whether it's these pitch competitions, once due diligence is done and they actually get to run your numbers and see what you're really worth, then there's actual negotiation that happens.
Okay.
And that negotiation determines, you may see somebody on TV and they say, "Yeah, I'm going to give you $5 million for 10% of your business," and then they do the numbers and they're like, you came on here and what you said is not what the books are showing."
Yeah.
And they may say, "I'll still give you the 2 million, but I'm going to need more because I have to do more work to build you up and get you ready to scale at the rate that you need to scale. I may need to bring in more people to work under you who are more experienced and all these things." So I think people have to be really aware of that. um,
Hmm.
and that's why I say you have to think about what is the goal for your business, right? Is the goal that I'm building this business to give it down to my kids? Is it I want to scale it, sell it, tap out and go and retire and go back home and have a beachfront property for a tenth of the
Hmm.
price of what you get here in Canada? What are those goals that you're doing? What are you willing to relinquish for that capital? Is Canada the only region where you can find funding from? Are the banks and institutions the only place you can get funding from? Can you crowd fund? Are you willing to grow at a slower rate so that as you grow slowly, you can retain 100% of equity and still eventually hit your goals, but maybe it takes you an extra 10 years to get there. So I think a lot of people need to sit back and really think through what their goals are, and not just so be focused on, I want to make X amount of money and I want to scale. Because, and it's not just Dragon's Den, it's a lot of, if you go on press, I think entrepreneurs don't think about this. I'm gonna go on, Good Morning America or Cityline, and
Hmm.
on the shopping network, and they love the product. Do you have the infrastructure to sustain that? Because that's gonna make or break your business. People don't think through that. They just think, I
That
want to
is,
go on the shopping network and sell my African dresses. Can you make $700,000 African dresses by tomorrow if everybody loves your design, girl?
oh my God, you hit on a very important point there. I was sitting in a meeting with a client who like makes almost $10 million. This client it's in the cosmetic distribution space. And so there is this other lady who came in from Toronto wanting to find a company that's going to take their business and take it international. As luck would have it, luck or fate or whatever, these two people met and it's like, oh, yes, we can actually take your product and take it international. Do you have the infrastructure to make this work? Yes, 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 we do. It's like, okay, first order, send us 500 units. And then she pulls out. Like,
Yeah.
She didn't have the infrastructure to make that happen. So what you're saying really, really does make sense, because a lot of people have all these big lofty goals, but they haven't actually taken the time to say, what is it going to take of me to fulfill on this goal, and am I ready for it?
Yeah.
I think there's
And
that
sometimes
disconnect because people
they
say
don't
the
have
want
it.
things, but they're not putting in the
Yeah.
work to make the thing happen.
And sometimes you may not have the infrastructure, right? But do you have the support system that's going to be there? And I'll give you an example. There was one client I had. He ran a trucking business his whole life, and he ended up selling it, I think, like 20 years later for like $100 million, and he still retains majority stake in that company.
Mhm.
This guy told me, I remember we went in to, pitch him and everything, and he told us this his story, and he's like, he got his big break because there was a snowstorm in the US, and I think all these trucking companies like pulled out. And was it Macy's or whomever, I think it was Macy's, they were looking for somebody who could drive down to the US, pick their stuff up from another state, and drive it to New York because there's that big Macy's Day sale that happens. I think it's on Boxing Day or Christmas Eve or whatever.
Mhm.
And he was like, everybody said no because it was an insane snowstorm. And he said yes. And he got his friends and his sons and whomever. And they just went and they loaned trucks and they drove all the way from Toronto, all the way down to New Jersey, back to the US in this horrific snowstorm to deliver these goods. And that helped him solidify his big contract that put him on the map. So there's
Mm.
gonna be risks. There's gonna be, you just have to jump on an opportunity. But again, he said yes because he knew I can call my homeboys to do this. Like you gotta know that you know what I mean? Like you can make this happen if the whether it's the sewing the 500 dresses or whatever, you and your aunties and everybody you know are gonna sit down and get this sewing. Like, and if you can't do that, you have to be realistic about your circumstances. It's just me and my two best friends running this business. I might have to give up on this, but hope that the next time the opportunity comes around, that I am in a position where I'm ready versus killing a situation because especially with like VCs and this type of thing, these people talk. So now you go and you
Yes.
pitch, and I've moved to a different firm. I'm gonna remember, yo, the last time we tried to give this girl funding, she couldn't deliver. It's 2 years
Yeah.
later. Yeah, she's grown, she's had success, but like
Yeah,
I
you
had a
created the
better
first
reaction with
impression, right?
it.
It's like, no, we don't want to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So it's just you got to make calculated. There's risks. Entrepreneurship is a risky business. You gotta take those calculated risks and see what is gonna be pay off and what are you willing to be patient on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. So you've definitely spoken to a lot of businesses, a lot of people. Like, what has been your favorite client transformation for somebody that you help to do something in the financial space?
I think I don't have one particular client. I think it's just all of these stories of, and so I say that's the beauty of living across Canada because when you live in Toronto, your portfolio looks different of the type of businesses there, but more established. But in Alberta, it was awesome because it was literally these made it from the bottom, now I'm here stories. Like you will not believe. Like I said, like, there was one guy, he's apparently has the only contracts for 18 wheelers in Canada because he finessed a way to get them up here back in like the 80s or the 90s or whatever.
Hmm.
There's another guy, he dropped out of school because he had a learning disability, went and worked on oil rigs, and he went and started a multi-million dollar oil vac operations business. And when the pandemic happened and the oil crash and all these things have been happening, his business has sustained throughout
Yeah.
that, right? And he didn't go to any fancy school. He has grade 10 up to grade 10 education. He is a redneck guy. If you saw him, you would never think twice. Even the way that he built his business, he went alternative routes to finding ways to find people who work for him. But like those are the stories for me that are like, for example, in the oil and back trucking business, a lot of times they'll hire employees and they'll buy trucks. He was like,
Hmm.
I'm not going to do that. I'm going to contract out to these people. So guys will already have their trucks and stuff. They can come. And where he went to find his clients, he didn't advertise in like the regular places. Funny enough, he actually went to the strip club to go and find them because that's the big thing up in Fort McMurray back in the day. But when I say like you have to think outside the box to grow your
Yeah,
business, that
that's
man's a
that's the
millionaire and he's
perfect
doing
thinking
better than
outside the
all of us.
box.
I'm not saying you gotta go to the strip club to do that, but to me, those are the stories I love because I'm just like, we get taught as in society, and especially I feel like my upbringing. I don't know if it's but it's like go to school and learn, and everything you need to know is in school, and be corporate and da da da. And I look at these stories, and I'm just like, wow, these guys really, they're really like, I'm living life, and I'm just gonna
Yeah.
do what needs to happen to get these deals and build this business. And to me, those are the greatest transformations because when you see them on the road, you'd never think twice, but they're more successful than the person you see in the fancy suit walking down on Bay Street.
Yeah. I heard you talk about your own experience and the fact that you being in sales is what created the ability for you to then be able to like being a great salesperson opens doors for you because it teaches you how to negotiate. And you definitely you mentioned somebody that I've kind of listened to, Patrick Bet David, and
Yeah.
how his career in sales that created what he is right now. So would you say sales is one of the top skills that entrepreneurs definitely need to learn, or if not, then what is it?
You need to be one of two things. You need to be a
Yeah.
salesperson, or you need to be a very technical person who can build something in this day and age, I feel like. um Sales more so than anything, because I always tell people, even if you're not an entrepreneur, if you're working in the workforce, everybody needs a salesperson. They will
Yeah.
always need a salesperson. And sales experience is going to teach you a lot. It's going to teach you how to negotiate. It's going to teach you how to think outside the box. It's going to expose you to a lot more. It's going to teach you how to negotiate, not just in business deals, but even for your career, right? In salary negotiation and that type of thing. Sales is, if you look at almost every entrepreneur that's doing really, really well, they're probably a salesperson, with the exception of maybe a couple, and they're the very technical people who are like Shopify. Their CEO was an engineer, a software
Okay.
engineer, right? Even Mark
Mm-hmm.
Zuckerberg, he I think was a software engineer, or he was in the tech space. So I believe that you either need to be a very technical person. It doesn't have to be tech; it can be whatever your industry is, or you have to be a salesperson in order for you to be successful. But I feel like the salesperson will do better than the technical person, because technical people will always struggle to sell. They'll always struggle. And you're not just selling to the customer, you're selling to the banker, you're selling to the VC, you're selling to, you're always selling. That's your job as an entrepreneur, because you want to make
Mm-hmm.
money. Somebody has to buy your product or your service at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, or your mentorship, whatever it is that you're pushing, right?
Yeah.
So sales is the biggest and the most important trait that people need to learn.
And where is the best place to go get that kind of training?
Hands on, baby. Hands on. You got to get out there. Listen, I was not a great salesperson. Like, I remember growing up as a kid, and I think it comes from my mom, because
Yeah.
my mom always used to be like, because we were growing up apartheid, she was always like, just go and network, just go talk to people, just like, because that's kind of like what helped her, right? And I
Yeah.
used to hate it. I'm an introvert. I used to hate, like,
You
I
are?
still to this, I'm very much an introvert. I hate networking events. I would rather like do a one-on-one with somebody than go to like a room full of strangers. That's just me. So taking being in jobs where it sort of forced me to have to talk to people, figuring out how I'm going to navigate that sales process, and it'll look different for, and that networking, it'll look different for different people. um so you then learn like what becomes your sales persona. So if you're not naturally a salesperson, do you have to get like, you put on your Sasha Fierce if you have
Yeah.
to be able to go out there and sell? Or is your sales, your networking style very different? Like I said, like I don't like going to a room. I'll go into a room full with strangers, but my preference is to say, hey, I reach out to you. We were at this event. Let's go grab a cup of coffee, because I enjoy one-on-one or small group interaction. I find that more valuable use of my time. So you
Yeah.
got to navigate and figure out what works for you, and then apply that to your business and how you're going to sell. Whether that, and that, you know, that could be, I don't want to go door to door or go to conferences or go whatever the sale, however your sales model is. It might be, I'm comfortable creating a video and running ads for this. I'm comfortable doing interviews and getting into press and doing write ups in my industry, whatever circulars. So that's going to grow my name, and then people are going to look me up and then buy whatever I'm selling. You got to
Yeah.
figure out what that model of sales is that's going to work for you, but you have to learn those sales skills to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And for me too, like you said, you're an introvert, and I don't believe that. Sometimes when I tell people I'm an introvert, they don't believe it too, because like you run a podcast, yeah, but I'm talking to people one on one. But also,
Yep.
that's created for me the ability to then actually pick up the microphone and speak somewhere. It's like, oh, Ida, you're natural, but yeah, I got a lot of practice to then start talking
Yeah.
to people. So I
And
think
then people
it's
buy into
very,
your brand, right? There's like the credibility. I now trust Ida. What is Ida selling? Oh, you know what? I actually might want to buy this or recommend this because I love her podcast. Like you're finding your vehicle to brand yourself, right?
yeah, yeah,
So
definitely.
I
Oh well, thank you for saying that. And I have another question there. So, of course, in general, people hire me to do their accounting, bookkeeping, and taxes. And one thing I've noticed is that most businesses ignore the need for that
yeah,
until they get into some kind of trouble. And so,
yeah.
you being someone that has worked with a lot of them, like, what do you see in this area? Is it something that you and what would you advise businesses that are coming
L-
and have
Listen,
this issue?
no bank's giving you money if your books aren't in order. Even if you are a rinky-dink little company and you're like, I just need $1,000, nobody is giving you money until they see your books. So
Yeah,
get your books in order from day one, and that could be hiring services to people like yourself, or figuring out like how do you automate it online, or how do you whatever you need to do. Always be ready because you never know when that opportunity for money is going to walk through the door, right?
yeah,
And you don't want to be one day you're at an event and there's a Wes Hall that shows up and somehow he's just like, yo, your business is amazing. And then you've not been doing bookkeeping for like the last 5, 6 years. You've somehow managed to skate the CRA. But like, you know what I mean? Like, you got to be ready. You got to
yeah.
be ready. So I think that's item number one is making sure you're incorporated properly, you doing your books accurately. Like I said, making sure that you're paying the least you can pay for your banking services. So shopping around once a year or once every 2 years, depending on how much bandwidth you have. Those are important things that people need to pay attention to. Um, and then making sure that you're ready to swap out, like I said, your players as you grow and as you need them, because grandma can't be doing the books in her little notebook for 20 years. You know what I'm saying?
I knew you were going to say grandma, and I was ready for it.
Grandmas are gonna hate me if they listen to this podcast. They're like, what has she got against us?
What's wrong with her? Why does she keep saying you guys should fire me? Like, she okay? Like, I'm not going anywhere. Oh, I'm looking at my notes here, and I did mention burnout and high performers. And I was actually talking to a mindset coach not too long ago, and she said, like, Ida, you know what? That's actually the problem with a lot of high performers.
Yeah.
They get to a stage where they're afraid of letting people down, or they've created this personality for themselves that's like, I am the person that gets things done, and then they fear quote unquote letting people down. But at some point it's like, okay, you know what? That's it. I'm out. Like,
Yeah, I think my problem has being first generation everything. And I
yeah.
think a lot of people who are first generation everything's suffer from this. Um, you always feel the need to perform and achieve and have momentum. And nobody has ever taught you that you have to rest, because I had to recognize that growing up with not a lot of money, that was the fear that was driving the success, right? A lot of people who are successful or high performers, if we're being real, it's a trauma that they're sort of it's that's enabling the high performance. And you get to
Hmm.
a point where I think for myself, I just got so burnt out. There was the pandemic. I never rested in the pandemic when most people got to take a little bit of a breather. I was dealing with being president of CAUFP and George Floyd, and helping other people manage their trauma around racism, right? And
Hmm.
then post that, I then swapped jobs. I was in a very high performing job at a big four accounting firm, and it took my sister getting breast cancer earlier this year for me to really stop and be like, what what do you want out of life? What, do you just want to keep doing this? What does success look like to you? And what does your happiness look like? You can still be successful and be happy, but what does that look like? Do you have to keep going, 100 miles per hour doing all these things? Um,
Hmm.
and that was sort of the catalyst for me to take a pause, going to therapy to recognize that, like I said, a lot of this is it's trauma infused. It's the fear of, I never want to be that poor again. I never want to
Yeah.
be, you know, and that was kind of where, and I'm still working through it. I think I'm learning a lot. I've been 6 months out of the workforce now,
Hmm.
and it's been the best thing that's ever happened. But I'm not going to say that it was easy, because you're coming to terms with, what is my identity. My identity was
Yes.
these things. What was my success? I walked away from a startup that I co-founded. Now I'm just in my, you know um, relaxation, restoration, whatever phase, and I'm figuring out, like, what is the next thing for me. And that's a lot of deep inner work that I think a lot of top performers hide away from. And I think it's probably a good thing that it's happened, because I feel like whatever happens in the next phase of my life is going to be better, because I'm going to be more self-aware. I'm going to be more in tune with things, and I'm going to have boundaries for what I say no to.
Yeah.
And not be, the one who's always, yes, I want to do it. I don't have any room on my plate, but I'm just going to put my hand up because I'm passionate, and actually really self assess what it is that I want to involve myself in. So, yeah,
Wow, that is deep. Thank you for sharing that.
no problem. No problem. And I hope a lot of women who are listening, not even women, just men, everybody, um, do what you need to do to take a break. Um, your success is not determined by your productivity level. Recognize that those skills that got you those achievements will get you that after the fact. But take a minute to pause, because life is really short. Like, if you didn't learn that in the pandemic, there will be something else that God, the universe, Allah, whoever you believe in,
Yeah.
will push in front of you to say, relax, take a time out, and breathe. It's okay to breathe sometimes.
Yeah. Oh Lord. And I heard somebody say it always comes in threes. It comes like a whisper. Like there's something whispering like you need to take a break or some whatever. It comes like a whisper. And then if you don't listen, it comes like a tap on the shoulder. And when you don't listen, then it comes like a bang, a door shut in your face, like now you gotta go. And
Yeah.
so something like we know, but oftentimes we're pushing. It's like, no, I can't
Yeah.
say no
And
right
in
now.
the
I have to keep
future,
going.
yeah, next
Yeah.
summer, next year, when I reach this amount of dollars, when my business is sold, when what we always will make an excuse. And it's like, no, you can pause. Life still has to happen, bills still have to get paid. We get that. But you don't have to have as much on your plate all the time. And I think for business owners, that looks at, what can you outsource, right? Little things like that. And I'm sure you've probably, given your line of business and the work that you do, you've probably talked to many, I'm assuming, entrepreneurs, and
Yeah.
you've told them this. Like, sometimes it means you got to grow the team. You got to hire more
Yeah.
people. And yes, you're taking a loss because you're paying salaries, but like, you get to see your kids for dinner. Isn't that
Yes.
better?
Yeah. And actually be at dinner because I used to do that as well. Before I got my video editor, I would
Yeah.
record the podcast and edit them myself. I was like, I'm there, but I'm not there. And so right now when I shoot, I drop it off like, okay, Ryan, do your thing. And he's gonna be listening to this. Ryan, go do your thing. And he
Yeah.
takes care of it. It's like, Ida's ready, fine, put it up. So it's really that letting go, like knowing when it's time to expand your team, knowing when it's time to just take some time for you and only doing the things that only you have to do. Like I have to do this
Yeah.
interview. My team cannot do the interview for me, but I don't have
Yeah.
to do the rest of it. So what is it I need? I can outsource and growing the team to do that.
Yeah. And this goes back to that initial conversation we had earlier, right? About, what does the roadmap for your business look like? What pace do you want to grow at? What do you want to achieve? What are you willing to give up? And what are you willing to put a boundary up on? I think people really need to think through those things and not get so fixated on the number, whether it's a salary, whether it's a dollar bill investment, whether it's revenue. It's really just thinking through those things. Because again, like I said, like, I don't know, I'm having a very kumbaya, like, life is short moment these days, and everything. I'm just, that's my thought process, is like, no, if I die tomorrow, am I gonna be cool with where my life is at right now?
Are
And
you?
that's really changed. I think I'm getting there. I won't say 100%. There's still a couple of things on the goal board that I would like, but I'm probably learning to prioritize myself. And I think that is, I'm very happy with the fact that I'm now learning that, and I'm learning how to give myself grace, something that I didn't do before. So, very happy with that. So yeah.
Great. So, what does success look like to you right now? Because I heard you talk about it in another podcast, and you talked about wanting to help women founders. Is that still your goal for the future, or has it changed, or are you just in the space where you're still to decide on what it's going to look like for you in the future?
Still to decide. It definitely involves women. I think, especially women of color. I think there's still so much work that needs to be done for us. Um, what that looks like, I'm still exploring and validating, but it definitely will be in that segment just because I think women are dope and the world overlooks us, especially women of color. And we just need to, we can't wait for somebody to save us, so we got to build those frameworks and systems and put those in place to help ourselves. So um, stay tuned, and hopefully in the near future something will be launched. I don't know what yet, but something.
And it's going to be great.
Yeah. Yes,
Oh,
from your
Lord.
mouth to God's ears.
Oh, amen. Amen. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd want to share with the audience? Maybe something you're working on, anything you want to promote? Please go ahead.
No, nothing right now. I think, like I said, I'm not part of the BlackTies startup, but it's still something that a platform that I think is really great. So for anyone who's listening and is looking to connect with other professionals, which includes entrepreneurs, definitely go and check out the app and the website. That's something that's important, and I will be eventually launching my own podcast, so stay tuned for that, and that'll be focused along business topics, impact, social impact. That's also very important to me, and a range of
Mhm.
different discussions on that. So that should be, I'm aiming to launch that in the new year.
I'm looking forward to it. So you see, that was coming. Like that education piece of it, you're already working on it. It's just we didn't hear it yet, but we heard
Yeah.
it first here.
Yes. Got the exclusive.
We got the exclusive. And so if somebody wanted to connect with you to learn more from you, what's the best platform to reach you on?
LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn. I always answer my LinkedIn's. Unless you're trying to sell me something, then I'm gonna ignore you. I get hit up for a lot of sales stuff on there, so it's
Yeah.
very hard to get me to get my attention on that type of stuff. And I'm, like I said, I used to be a salesperson, so you gotta come hard if you're trying to sell to me. But yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the best place if anybody wants to connect, follow, or even if they just they want to chat and they need some help or advice. I'm usually always available to help folks out with that.
Awesome. The links on how to contact Meryl are going to be down in the description below. If you're listening to this on the podcast, check the show notes. If it's on YouTube, check the description below. And until next time, guys, it's been Meryl Afrika. Thank you so much for your time today, Meryl. And thank you, guys. We're going to see you next time. For more insightful conversations with entrepreneurs, check out this video right here. I think you'll love it. Continue to enjoy, and I'll see you there.